The test is in 4 parts, Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, and Part 4. Now look at Part 1.
Part 1.
IELTS practice. Questions 1 to 6. You will hear a telephone conversation about studying abroad. You should answer the questions as you listen because you will not hear the recording a second time.
First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Hello, admissions guidance. How can I help?
Hello. I'd like some information about studying at your university. Can you help me?
Yes, of course. What course are you interested in applying for?
International business. I already have a first degree from a university in my country.
Fine. So you'd want to do a master's level course?
Yes, that's right.
OK. We offer an MIB course. That's a 12-month full-time course. I can send you details of that course, or you can download a PDF file from our website.
Could you put it in the post, please? I don't have access to the internet at the moment. Could you tell me what qualifications I need for that course?
Yes, for the MIB, you need a first degree. The minimum qualification is a 2-1 or a first.
Okay.
And in English language, you need a score of 7 or above in IELTS.
That's not a problem. I have a 9.
That's fine.
Could you tell me the course hours and the semester dates, please?
Yes, there's a total of 10 hours of lectures, seminars and tutorials a week, and there's an extended stay abroad at the beginning of the second semester. That involves spending a month at the national head office of a multinational corporation.
Okay.
And the semester dates are... just a moment... OK, the first semester starts on the 27th of September and ends on the 22nd of January, and the second semester runs from the 7th of February to the 27th of May.
Can you tell me a bit more about the actual course content?
Well, I don't know much about the course personally. I'm an admissions officer, but I can read the course description for you if you like. If you need to know more about the academic side, you'll need to speak to the course tutor.
Thanks. I'd be very grateful if you could tell me as much as possible now.
I'll just read the main points. It involves the advanced study of international organisations, their management and their changing external context. Students develop their ability to apply knowledge and understanding of international business to complex issues, both systematically and creatively, to improve business practice.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Now, if you could give me your name and address, I'll have full details of postgraduate courses sent to you.
Okay. My name is Javed Iqbal.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
Okay. My name is Javed Iqbal. That's JAVED
Thank you. And your home address, Mr. Iqbal?
It's Aga Khan Road, Shalimar 5, Islamabad, Pakistan.
Thank you. And could I ask you 1 or 2 more questions for our records?
Yes, of course.
What was your first degree in?
I did economics. I got a first-class degree.
And where did you study?
At the university here in Islamabad.
OK. Now, you said you had an IELTS level 9. Could I ask what your first language is?
Actually, I'm bilingual in Urdu and English.
Thank you very much. I'll put full details in the post today.
Thank you. And thanks for all the information.
Not at all, Mr. Iqbal. Thank you for calling.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2.
Part 2.
You'll hear 2 university students discussing a social science lecture they attended.
First, look at questions 11 to 14. Listen carefully.
Did you go to the first social science lecture yesterday?
Yeah. Didn't you see me there?
No. I was trying so hard to understand the lecturer.
What didn't you understand?
A lot of it, really. For example, he said we needed to study history as part of the course, but I didn't get why.
You probably missed it. He said early on that we need to learn from our past mistakes.
Right. But he also said we need to put ourselves in the place of our ancestors. Why is that?
I think the point is that it's not enough to know how they lived and what they did. We need to know what they thought.
I see. And I've written transferable skills in my notes next, but I have no idea what that means.
If you study social science, you learn skills that you can use in a job.
Oh, right. Is that all? Okay, but why is that?
The point he made was that in studying social science, you use a flexible and adaptable approach to learning.
Before the broadcast continues, look at questions 15 to 20. You will now listen to the second part of the talk.
He also kept mentioning all the other subjects we will need to study as part of the course. I didn't write them all down, did you?
Some of them. I think I can make sense of my notes. The first one was anthropology, which he said would cover prehistory and archaeology as well.
Okay.
Then there's economics. I wrote down that this was not meant to mean that we will spend all our time looking at economic theory, but more that we need to see how humans behave.
That's good. I don't think I could handle economic theory. He said something about education too, didn't he?
Yeah. He said we'll be looking at how cultural information is handed down from one generation to the next through teaching children.
He said we'd be focusing on geography too, but I can't really remember which aspects. Can you?
I noted it down, I think. Here we are, yes, particularly in relation to urban planning. It's law that I got confused about. I didn't understand why he linked that to economics.
I think he meant that laws affect the way wealth is distributed.
That makes sense. Now, what are the science wars?
Okay, I did get that. The science wars are about how social science collects information. In sociology and social work, and in social science generally, They can only study patterns of behavior and observe. If you compare that to the way scientists work in physics or chemistry, it's very different because they use specific experiments that can be tested and which give concrete answers. Social studies is often accused of being unscientific. That's all.
Okay. But it still looks like a good course, doesn't it? You don't have any regrets, do you?
None at all. I'm looking forward to it.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3.
Part 3.
You will hear two students, Ramil and Kirsten, discussing presenting a paper at an architecture conference. You now have 30 seconds to read questions 21 to 28.
Hi, Kirsten. Have you heard about that architecture conference in Oxford at the end of the year?
Yeah, I saw the leaflet on the notice board. As it's my final year, I ought to try giving a paper, but I've got no idea how to go about it.
Oh, I think you should go for it. I did one last year. It's quite straightforward. First of all, you need to see what the conference themes are. You know, what topics they are covering. You can do that by looking it up on the website. You need to submit a paper that falls into one of the categories they give you.
Oh, that may give me some ideas.
Then, while you're doing that, you should also have a look at the information on how to submit your paper. The rules, if you like, such as the length. It's important you follow those.
I see. And then I suppose the next stage is to start writing it up. I'd like to use it as an opportunity to propose some future work, but I understand it must be based on current work. Still, there's plenty to choose from. It makes sense to do something that I'm more familiar with.
Yes, and the other thing is, when you've written it up, then go back and look at your data carefully and make certain that you've presented it in a format that is standard for your subject. Remember, people have to absorb information very quickly while they're listening. Don't make it too complicated.
Okay, well, I reckon that'll take me about a month to get that sorted. Then the next thing I have to do, I guess, before I send it off to the conference organizer, is give the whole thing to the events officer so that he can look through it and see if it all makes sense and is okay.
Yeah. Remember to warn him that it's en route so he can fit it into his schedule.
Oh.
Then you're done, really. All you have to do after that is to go through it and sort out any changes you need to make. Then finally, you can submit it. You can do that online.
Phew, good. Then I just wait to hear, I suppose. How long does that take?
It depends, but usually about 6 weeks.
Oh.
When you hear if your paper has been accepted, then at that stage, it's worth giving them a list of any technical things you need when you actually give the talk. A screen or video players or that sort of thing.
Okay, but that's a long way off. And I know that if my paper is accepted, then at that stage, I have to give them a short text about myself and my academic background so that they can put it in the brochure. Famous at last.
Yeah.
You now have 15 seconds to read questions 29 to 30.
Right, well, I've got to get a couple of things sorted if I'm going to get this paper completed.
Have you got enough data?
Possibly. I'd like to reinforce some of it, though, so I thought I'd send out some more questionnaires. I was looking at that thesis that Angela wrote last year, and she said you need a sample of over 100 to be sure of your results.
I think some of this year's postgraduates are doing some of the same stuff as you on buildings. Why don't you talk to them?
I'll end up getting confused. It would be more useful for me to actually go out to that site by the rail bridge to see how they're building the new factory.
Oh.
I managed to get hold of Professor Barnett at London University, and he said I should go out and take pictures. I'm pretty busy, but I'll have to make time. Anyway, what about you? What are your plans?
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
Part 4.
Now listen to the second part of the lecture. As you listen, complete the notes below.
First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Many typically American characteristics, individualism, self-reliance, informality, punctuality, and directness, are a result of those values mentioned earlier. Other national traits could also be identified, however. 1. Americans cooperate. Although often competitive, Americans also have a good sense of teamwork and cooperate with others to achieve a goal. 2. Americans are friendly, but in their own way. In general, friendships among Americans tend to be shorter and more casual than friendships among people from other cultures. This has something to do with American mobility and the fact that Americans do not like to be dependent on other people. Americans also tend to compartmentalize friendships, having friends at work, family friends, friends on the softball team, etc. 3. Americans ask a lot of questions, some of which may to you seem pointless, uninformed, or elementary. Someone you have just met may ask you very personal questions. No impertinence is intended. The questions usually grow out of a genuine interest. 4. Americans tend to be internationally naive. Many Americans are not very knowledgeable about international geography or world affairs. They may ask uninformed questions about current events and may display ignorance of world geography. Because the US is not surrounded by many other nations, some Americans tend to ignore the world. 5. Silence makes Americans nervous. Americans are not comfortable with silence. They would rather talk about the weather than deal with silence in a conversation. 6. Americans are open and usually eager to explain. If you do not understand certain behavior or want to know what makes Americans tick, do not hesitate to ask questions. Just as values and traits differ somewhat from one culture to another, so do the personal habits associated with good manners and courtesy. While very often there does not seem to be any particular reason why a particular way of doing something is considered good manners, observing these cultural rules will make Americans more comfortable with you, and therefore you with them. It is, of course, impossible to cover all the possibilities here. If you are unsure in a situation, just ask. Americans like to be helpful. 1. Queuing up or lining up is essential. Courtesy requires that you do not push from behind, stand next to the person being helped, or cut into a line. If you should accidentally bump someone, you should say, "Excuse me." 2. Americans blow their noses into a tissue. Spitting, clearing phlegm, or sniffing as from a cold are considered rude. 3. It is considered poor manners to slurp, chew noisily, or open your mouth while chewing. 4. Questions are seen as a good way of getting acquainted, but questions about a person's age, financial affairs, cost of clothing or personal belongings, religious affiliations and sex life are considered too personal for questioning, except between very close friends. 5. Men generally do not hold hands or link arms in public with other men. This is somewhat more acceptable between women and quite common between men and women. Now, a few words about personal safety. Unfortunately, in the US, one must be aware of crimes. It is wise to be especially careful until you are familiar with the community in which you live. Remember that good judgment and common sense can significantly reduce chances of having an unpleasant and perhaps harmful experience. Basic safety rules include the following. 1. Do not walk alone at night. 2. When you leave your room, apartment, or automobile, make sure that all doors are locked and all windows are secured. 3. Do not carry too much cash or wear jewellery of great value. 4. Never accept a ride from a stranger. Do not hitchhike and do not pick up hitchhikers. 5. Be careful of purses and wallets, especially in crowded metropolitan areas where there may be purse snatchers and pickpockets. 6. If a robber threatens you, at home or on the street, try not to resist unless you feel that your life is in danger and you must fight or run away. Give up your valuables as calmly as you can and observe as much as possible about the robber to tell the police when you report the crime. A final note. Keep an open mind. Don't judge what you see as right or wrong, but make it a challenge to try to understand the variety of American behaviours which you may observe. You certainly do not have to participate in something you disagree with, but you can try to understand it. This will help you build an attitude of intelligent and liberated respect for cultures, both your own and others.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.